Hi, everyone. My name is Tony Dahlager. I'm a managing director at Analytics8. I'm excited to be presenting on the topic today of how you can actually maximize the impact of your data automation initiatives in your organization. For those of you who aren't familiar with our firm, Analytics8 is a data and analytics consultancy. We offer services that focus on transforming and growing our customers' businesses by impacting their people, their processes, their technology, and obviously their data in positive ways. Specifically, we offer services in the area of data strategy, data management, and analytics. Personally, I'm responsible for our data management service line, which includes everything related to data architecture, data engineering, and all of our cloud services. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to present to you all today. As we go through the presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll have some time to do a live Q&A at the end as well. I intend today to share the basic principles that we teach and honestly indoctrinate in our consultants from their first day at our firm to ensure that we maximize the benefit that we provide to our customers every day when we work with them on projects, programs, initiatives, that sort of thing. So this is not a technical presentation, but it is one that has massive implications on the success of your technical projects and programs in your organization. So first, we're going to talk about why you should care about business impact in the first place. Sounds like a silly place to start, but we actually want to build a justification for why you should care. Second, we're going to talk about the challenges that many organizations are facing today that help or that actually hurt us in making an impact. And third, we're going to talk about strategies for how you can actually overcome those challenges to maximize the impact of your data projects, programs, and solutions for your organization. So like I said, we're going to start with just why you should care about business impact in the first place. When used properly, data has the power to impact organizations in powerful, meaningful ways. It helps organizations improve health outcomes, customer satisfaction, expanding knowledge globally, connecting people together. I know there are customers of Ascend with big, hairy mission statements to audacious missions like reducing the burden of disease, ending food deserts, and helping the health of our planet, right? So this should be obvious, but I've worked with enough technical teams over the years to know it's really easy to get pulled into the details and lose the big picture, to lose the why behind what you are doing on a day-to-day basis. It's so important to not lose that focus. If you look hard enough, you can connect the mission of your organization to even the most mundane tasks that you do on a day-to-day basis. And that sort of connectivity to a bigger purpose is incredibly motivating to you and your team. And data automation can help unlock your team's potential to have an exponentially bigger impact on that mission than you would be able to through manual processes or just your individual efforts alone. So even though we desire to make a difference in our work, there are some things that are preventing us from maximizing that impact today. In fact, there's a lot of things that are causing headwinds that seem to be impeding our progress today. Basically, everyone I've talked to at our customers and prospects feel like they have way more work than they can handle, that they don't have enough people to do that work, and they certainly don't have enough engagement from their business counterparts to be successful. Beyond those constraints, there are additional momentum killers that are kind of lurking under the surface of our teams that can often go unacknowledged. So it's really important that we call these out when we're trying to acknowledge challenges, right? The first step to healing is admitting you have a problem. So we're going to admit we have a problem. The first concept here, the first silent momentum killer I want to talk about today is how technical debt is real. So cone of trust here. Most teams, if we're being honest, including even ours internally at Analytics8, we're carrying around and kind of ignoring some technical debt in our organizations. You can rebrand it and call it like the result of Agile development or whatever, but we all know it's a problem and it's a growing problem. There's a temptation to move really fast and value quick solutions over doing things the right way in an automated, best practice way that's actually going to scale properly and easily adapt to changes over time that are inevitable. So I know we may not all agree what technical debt is, but I'm specifically referring to all those shortcut Band-Aid fixes that you did to meet those unreasonable deadlines that were put on your team. I'm talking about that lift and shift migration work that really probably should have included refactoring when you moved from a legacy tech stack to a modern stack or modern environment or modern approach. I'm referring to all those new features that continually take precedent over improving existing features, even if improving prior work might actually be more important to the success and the long-term success of your organization. But, new stuff feels more impactful, but how can you tell if it really is impactful? Technical debt silently accumulates over time. It makes things more complicated and difficult to get things done. And it ends up kind of becoming the baggage that we carry around that reduces our impact that we can have on our organization. So how do you decide what to spend time on? How do you know what you should prioritize to maximize your impact? A second silent momentum killer is also not new, but it feels more prevalent today. So rather than technical debt, we can talk about technical doubt. And it's a very real, very disorienting issue that prevents us from making maximum impact. And I see this impeding progress in organizations of every size that I talk to on a daily basis, but people don't always realize that it's happening. So this technical doubt comes from all the noise around us that can make life confusing for data teams. Introducing doubt in everything, and inevitably that doubt reduces our positive impact by impeding progress. So technology capabilities overlap today more than ever. We look at different solutions, and it makes it really hard to know that you're doing things in the best, most optimal way. Obviously, tech vendors benefit from telling you what you're doing is wrong or old or no longer modern and needs to change immediately. They need to create that sense of need in you to actually sell their solutions and their offerings. Sometimes those are real needs that they're talking about that you have. Other times they can be a little bit overblown. And this can create what we call technical insecurity or that technical doubt. But it's not just software vendors that contribute to this feeling. We do it to each other as well as practitioners, right? There's a million so-and-so, such and such thing is dead blogs out there written by all sorts of different people, all sorts of different experience, and all sorts of different backgrounds. And everyone thinks everything is out of date. It's old and it's not going to work for your organization. And ultimately, this makes you doubt your approach and wonder, like, do I need to scrap everything I'm doing and start over from scratch to actually make an impact? Sometimes you do need a change to make an impact. But the question is, how can you be sure when it really is time to shift your organizational approach to how you're trying to solve problems to maximize that impact? Because sometimes, and often most of the time, we know that the issue often is how we implement tech that causes problems rather than what tech is implemented. This one's definitely not a silent momentum killer because we hear about it constantly, but it is easy to pretend like it doesn't exist in your teams today, right? Staffing is really hard right now. Finding people to do work is difficult. And it's difficult to keep the existing people on your team engaged and happy when the pressure and amount of work is continually building right now and increasing. On top of that, inflation is creating market pressures that cause folks to look elsewhere. So how can you keep your counterparts or your team engaged when it seems like the world seems to be quitting their jobs and moving on to the next opportunity, right? How can you position yourself to actually benefit from the great resignation and attracting the best talent to come to your team? And then the last momentum killer, forgetting about technology and code for a second, we still have the age-old momentum killer that teams aren't spending enough time gathering and refining requirements. The quality of requirements is still an issue for most technical teams, right? This is particularly prevalent now when it seems like every organization has 100 initiatives going on in parallel that are impacting their business equally, that all are high priority. it seems like there's no time to do due diligence, and this lack of engagement is making it harder to make an impact because you're not sure you're actually doing exactly what the business needs. Incomplete and assumptive requirements create all sorts of risk that you're going to spend time on stuff that's not going to be used, that isn't going to make a difference, and may end up getting deprioritized next week for the next most important thing that pops onto your to-do list. So how do you know what you're working on will be maximally impactful in that environment? And typically this is where I'm supposed to have some kind of like very robust project management or framework presentation where I talk about how Agile development answers all the issues that you just heard about, and to keep you on track to maximize the impact you have in your organization. And sure, while there are probably flavors of Agile that would help fix some of these issues, I think there's something actually more fundamentally wrong with how data teams think and act today in organizations. So then, in light of that, if it's not Agile, how do you maximize the impact you have through your data and automation initiatives? So maximizing your impact starts by having a really clear target. Even if you work in an Agile-like framework, it's critically important that you get headed out in the right direction from the start so that you have a chance to fight against all those headwinds that we just talked about of progress. And there's a lot of pressure right now to get stuff right the first time. So knowing what you're aiming for is incredibly important. To ensure you always have a clear target, I want to help you change the way that you think about the problems that you face first, to change the way that you talk to yourself, and to change the way that you talk about yourself with others. So instead of pushing a project management approach or some kind of new tech or architecture pattern, I'm going to teach you one of the most important and fundamental philosophies that we teach consultants at Analytics8. We tell our people to think like consultants, not like developers. I understand that's controversial at a conference filled with developers. So, and basically, since consulting can be a four-letter word to many of you, let's clarify and say we want to think like a good consultant and not a developer. Okay, what do I mean by that? For many of you, this is going to mean changing the way that you think about everything that you do from the outset. Because remember, getting the solution right the first time is the best way to not waste time, resources, and effort, to actually maximize the impact and time to value that you have in your organization. Time to value is a critical KPI that we use as consultants because we need to justify our existence early and often to remain partners with our clients. Here's a dirty little secret. So do you. Even if you are a salaried counterpart that works full-time for somebody like one of our customers, you still have to justify your existence as well. So we like to think, as technicians, we're going to be judged on the technical soundness of what we build, or the quality of our solution, or the way our code is written, or how well we executed a project. But if we end up missing the real problem that the business wanted to solve, we realize the risk of basically wasting everyone's time. And worse, we tend to over-engineer complex, technically impressive, yet completely misaligned throwaway solutions in scenarios like that. So that's really harsh. And it's a hard reality to accept that like some stuff that I've built missed the mark, isn't being used today. Whose fault that is, we could talk about that all day long and go through stories of that. But really, when it happens, it's everyone's fault for not thinking about the problem consultatively. So again, this sounds basic, but it's tough to stay disciplined in your thought, even for basic concepts, right? So the best way to think like a consultant and avoid throwaway work is to know why you are working on something in the first place. Simply, the difference between consultants and developers. Consultants start with the big picture by first understanding their objective, the end goal. They seek to understand why they are doing something before they think about how to solve a problem. As soon as you start thinking how, you're limiting and constraining your thoughts. If you can't answer, why are we doing this? Who will benefit from this? What will they end up doing with the information that we provide them? What's the benefit to the organization if this solution works? What's the risk to the organization if it fails? Or what's the opportunity cost if we just decide to not do it at all? If you can't answer those questions, you need to stop everything else you're doing and make sure that everyone understands the answer to those questions before you continue on your data automation project. If you can't answer that, you're entering risk into the equation that you're going to miss your mark. So you got to ask yourself honestly, right? Are you the kind of person who jumps straight into thinking about how to do something before you understand why you're being asked to do it in the first place? Developers start their thinking by asking questions that lead to answering how. They jump to a solution before they totally understand the objectives. Starting with why will give you a clarity of purpose that ensures you know for certain what the target that you're aiming at looks like. And the clarity of your purpose is what will give you laser focus on what is important, and equally as important, what is not important during the implementation of whatever you're doing. So even in the most mundane and trivial tasks, that's true. It helps if you verify if you're, it's going to help you actually verify if the requirements that you have are complete or not. And oftentimes it'll help you find creative and simpler solutions than you originally would have thought of if you just, jump straight to the solution. More than that though, and this is important. The biggest difference I see in people who behave like a consultant and think like a consultant in this manner instead of a developer is really how they view themselves, their self-image, and their work. And ultimately, that impacts how other people in your organization view and treat you as well, based on how you treat yourself. So it's not enough to simply one time think about, why am I really doing this? You need to constantly stay disciplined in your self-thought and remind yourself of the big picture so you can stay on track. This isn't just true for technical things, it's true for everything that we do. But again, reminding yourself why, that how you think about a problem matters. So here's some ways that you can stay disciplined in your self-talk, the way that you talk to yourself in your brain, like a consultant and not like a developer. This also might sound very basic, but again, it's so important to stay on mission, to keep your thoughts in line and disciplined in when you think about what you do. Your story is your purpose, and your purpose drives the way in which you do your work. So to think like a consultant, your internal self-talk needs to sound like a consultant. So even for something as basic as, hey, I'm going to apply a security patch this weekend. Consultants don't talk like that. What we say, again, this might sound silly to some of you, but it's important. What we say is, I'm protecting the reputation and brand of my organization. I'm mitigating the risk of business interruption or data loss from a security breach, and I'm protecting the trust of our clients by applying a security patch. Now, how you apply that security patch might actually change when you start to tell the right story to yourself. The way that you plan and execute your day-to-day tasks, even something as mundane as a security patch, is probably going to change when you're directed by that kind of why, instead of just, I'm logging in Saturday night to apply a security patch. This sounds like it's just marketing for your brain, right? But this doesn't just stop at marketing for your brain. Again, though, it kind of is that. And really, just if you took that away alone from this presentation, that can help you with your self-confidence, how you value yourself, how you have purpose at work. But even beyond that, right? An ounce of consultative thinking like that can oftentimes help reduce a ton of technical burden that you face in your problem-solving process. So my favorite example that I use for this is we often run into clients who talk about how they need real-time data solutions. And my favorite scenario where this happened, I had someone say, we need the data to be updated in real time. So I've been through this a few times with prospects and customers. So it was very easy for me to say, I need to know why. I need to know why you need it real time, right? That's always a good question to ask when somebody throws out that kind of a requirement. So I clarified, what do you mean? What do you mean by real time? And they answered, I need the data to be real time, right? We need to be able to serve our customers. The data is refreshed weekly. And my head, I tried not to laugh, right? But you're like, weekly is not real time. If I jump straight away to thinking about that really unclear requirement and solutioning around that, I might have wasted all sort of time on coming up with some kind of a complex solution versus what they actually needed, which was just making sure the data refreshes quickly when it becomes available. That's totally different, right? Asking why can help reduce that kind of a technical burden. That's an extreme example, but you get the idea, right? The best way to make sure that you have requirements set correctly up front and that you understand what you're actually going to be able to build is to know why your consumers want to actually use the solution in the first place, how they're going to use it, what sort of decisions they're going to make with the information. That will help you evaluate whether or not you have the right requirements or not. And again, that can help sort of all kinds of miscommunications as you go and build a real-time data pipeline for something that's just a weekly data feed. Staying disciplined in your thought also means being mindful of how assumptions that you make are formed and informed, especially about perceived constraints that you have on your team today. To be consultative, you need to be mindful of unchecked assumptions that create limitations on the solutions around you or how you think about solutions. And we can really easily reduce the impact of a solution by overestimating certain constraints. Not enough time, not enough people, not enough budget, just based on what we see. Again, I have another example of this where a client of mine, one of my stakeholders was asking me to attend a meeting that he was going to have with his IT team. And the whole meeting, right, IT was just telling him no to everything he was asking. Nope, not possible, over and over again, because they thought it was too expensive. Midway through the meeting, my stakeholder got so mad. He's like, well, what does too expensive mean for you then, right? And we found out that IT was worrying about blowing their annual budget by having to spend a few $100,000 on what this business person was asking for, right? They were concerned about the constraints that they had that they were aware of, when the whole time they didn't realize that this was actually costing the business millions of dollars a month, that like this was not a constraint that they should have been raising all along. Thinking like a consultant, make sure that you think and talk about return on investment, not just constraints. So to do this, you need to think about the value of what you are doing to the business in business terms. It's really easy to stop short on our projects of determining the anticipated and actual value that we're going to provide to the business. Just get it done, worry about that later, right? We think that, hey, project accepted by the business, delivered on time, we hit all of our targets, we're good, right? But that's not a clear enough way to actually measure whether or not you're having an impact. And if you can't measure how the size of the impact you're having, it's hard to know that you're maximizing it, right? When you know your target, you need to use data to determine if you're actually, if you're building things that are making a difference in the organization. The reality is, though, determining business value can be really hard, and it feels like a very messy process. But really, what I find is it's oftentimes easy to miss intangible considerations. We get the easy stuff, right? Like, hey, we saved this much time by automating this process. Typically, the man hours times the average hourly rate equals this much of a value to the business. That's impactful, but it doesn't really hit the multipliers that really communicate the value of the solutions we deliver, that really communicate the success, the shared success we have with our organizations when we build that kind of stuff. The true drivers of value are typically through when we create opportunity and when we mitigate risk. So start by estimating the impact of a solution from all these angles, and then set up measurements to actually confirm, did our solution have the intended impact or not? Because again, you can learn from the actual data on whether or not what you're doing is making a difference. So some opportunity values here, like I said, what's the value of having a better decision or like a perfect forecast? What is the impact of an improved decision-making process altogether on improved outcomes, right? If we expect like people are healthier, or we're, having less emissions or something like that. What are other types of outcomes that maybe aren't tangible in terms of dollars and cents, but are still positive impacts to the organizational mission? What's the impact of creating a new revenue stream for the organization, or on optimizing what you're already doing today? And from a risk management perspective, this like many times gets left out of the valuation, but you need to think about what's the cost of a data exposure event, especially when we're talking about automation efforts, right? Like manual processes where people have to touch data creates all kinds of risk for organizations. So Are you exposing yourself to regulatory fines or lawsuits or customer attrition through poor data quality or competitive disadvantages from that kind of exposure? Or even thinking about it from another perspective, like what's the cost of a bad decision that your organization might make that is informed by poor data quality? Those are all things that, I think have a bigger impact than just looking at it from, how many man hours did we save on this? And then once you understand the value in these new terms and the impact in these new terms, you need to appropriately communicate the value of what you're doing to the organization itself. I love automation, but that in itself is not the best way to talk about impact. You've done all the hard work up to this point, right? If you've done everything I've said to do at this point, now you got to put it into action, right? Change the way you think. You're connecting what you're doing to the mission of the organization. You know why you're working on this initiative. You know who benefits from it. You know the benefit if it works and the risks if it fails or if you don't do it at all. And you're constantly reminding yourself of that purpose so that you stay on track. You put together some rough estimates on the total impact of what you're doing, and you're measuring it to see whether or not it's hitting its outcome. Now you just need to stay on message, right? Take that positive self-talk that you have and mirror it to your external communication when you talk about what you're doing to those in and outside your team. The best way to get business buy-in for data automation projects is to position your projects in the terms that the business understands and values. So here's some basic tips that I have of things that I do with my team to actually make sure we're communicating value in the terms of the business to keep that buy-in high during our projects. They're simple, but they're effective. First, and my team will laugh when they see this, but start every meeting with a 10-second slide that reminds everyone why we're here, right? So that no one forgets the big picture. They're gonna get sick of this. It's okay to laugh about it, but right, we're not just building a data pipeline, we're ending food deserts through empirical supply chain optimization. Now, how are we coming along on that data ingestion story for that new data source, right? It doesn't take long, but it just makes sure no one's going to forget if you constantly talk about it. Second, I actually like to involve stakeholders in that process of valuing our projects that we talked about earlier. They've probably already done the exercise themselves when they requested funding for what they're asking you for. And so the big thing there is they can help you avoid being too conservative or too aggressive in your estimates. And then they'll actually know stuff that you don't know about the full impact, like we talked about with that example with the IT conversation. If they haven't done this work, then even better, right? You're making their lives easier by supporting them going to bat for maybe when you need to ask for more funding or additional resources or additional team members. And ultimately, right, this is going to fundamentally change the way the business views you as a technical resource. Like this concept of like somebody who gets it, right? When you talk about things in terms that people care about, the ways that they value the work that they do, it'll help them see that you're bought in too. And then third, this one's really important. When you have successes, share them with others, write them down in ways that people can read them or hear about them. Put them in PowerPoints and offer to share that PowerPoint with everybody. People love success stories, and it can be incredibly motivating and engaging to everyone around you when you share credit gratuitously, right? Changing your culture into becoming a data-driven organization has to start with that grassroots bottom-up buy-in from everyone, right? And this is the best way to build momentum, to share those success stories. So don't just focus on your team's success or your own personal success. Make sure you acknowledge the contributions of everybody in the business when you are successful, to make sure that everyone gets behind doing more with data. So remember, to recap, we want you to think like a consultant, to realize the benefits that we have when we think consultatively, right? So to maximize the impact that you have on your organization, you need to start by changing the way you think, changing the way that you actually talk to yourself and view the work that you do. Then you need to think about the work you're doing and the value that it is presenting in business terms. And then lastly, be willing to communicate that value and to share that success in your organization. All of that helps address all the momentum killers we talked about earlier, right? When we change the way we think, change the way we value our work, and change the way that we actually communicate that value, we address all the momentum killers. Technical debt, right? We're gonna stay focused on what is maximally impactful empirically, right? By using the value of the work we're doing as our guide. We're gonna reduce technical debt, right? Because we're gonna focus on simple, elegant solutions over complex, really cool slideware architecture stuff. From a requirements perspective, if we behave this way, we're going to get involved in the requirements gathering process earlier on. That's going to allow us to be more consultative versus reactive. And last, from employee retention, this is going to help your organization correctly value what your team is doing in the terms the business understands. And ultimately, it helps your team see how they connect to the bigger mission and vision of the organization itself, right? That drives employee engagement. All of these things are working together to help improve the world around us, right? And help you achieve your missions organization more completely. Again, I want to thank you for your time today. I would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear about how you're doing this in your organization today, or hear any success stories that come out of you implementing some of these consultative behaviors. And again, if you have any questions, please put those into the chat, and we'll have a Q&A session here together where we can talk about these in more depth.